I want to kind of get into the learn part right now, and then we'll have a little bit of fun. But you know, barbecue, you think, well, there's barbecue all over the place. There's Sonny's Real Pit. I mean, there's barbecue restaurants everywhere, right? So how special can barbecue be? But barbecue actually has a very long tradition. It started in the American South. Barbecue is from the southern part of the United States. Interestingly, the term barbecue actually, a lot of people think there's a little discussion about exactly where it came from, but a lot of people think it came from the Indians that lived in North Florida. They were the Timucua Indians, actually very powerful tribe before the Spanish came and spread some diseases, and then they were no more. But we all know about that. But they actually had a name, BBQ, very close to the name we use right now. Also, there were Caribbean tribes that were using a name very similar. Their barbecue consisted of putting sticks. Someone, I guess, discovered that the smoky wood that they put on their fire made the meat taste pretty good. So that's how they started the early barbecue. Of course, we have done a lot with it since. But Florida is a real origin for barbecue. So I think that's pretty cool and pretty neat. Some people also think that barbecue came from the name from an extinct tribe in Guyana that liked to cheerfully spit roast captured enemies. I don't think we'll be doing any of that today, I'm pretty sure. So I think we're safe.
We gotta go back to the car.
Now, America, predominantly the South, again, is where barbecue was developed, but there are a number of styles of barbecue in America. There's a North Carolina style barbecue. Who knows what the primary ingredient, their special ingredient for their barbecue is? Anyone? What'd you say? Vinegar. Very good. They are vinegar based, and believe it or not, there is an Eastern North Carolina style and a Western North Carolina style. The Eastern North Carolina style usually is very simple and uses vinegar and pepper, and that's about all they have of it. So it's a very straight up, very simple approach. Western North Carolina is much more complex. They use about 3 different sugars, and and their vinegar, by the way, is apple cider. It makes a lot of sense because North Carolina is a big apple grower. They use pepper, ketchup, and often 3 kinds of sugar. So that's a pretty sweet and tangy type sauce. South Carolina is pretty similar to its northern neighbor, but they have an interesting approach where they actually use a mustard-based barbecue sauce to make them a little distinguished from their northern cousins. Then we go into Memphis style. Anybody have a good feel? Memphis is famous for its barbecue. Anybody have a good style of what that's all about? Oh, yeah, it's got a little bit of that in there. I'm sorry?
Dry rub.
They do a lot, very good. A lot of dry rubs up there, and they're also famous for cooking a long, long time. They have open pits that they'll cook it for 14 hours or more before it's ready. So it's nice and tender, and with their dry rub spices, paprika, garlic sauce they use a lot actually on their barbecue. Now, Alabama. Anybody have a good feel for what our good friends in Alabama barbecue is like? Well, they borrow from North Carolina some, and also Memphis. There are areas of Alabama that use both of those styles. But they also have their own unique style that they're very proud of. It's a sauce that is composed of mayonnaise and vinegar-based concoction. Sounds pretty good, actually. Anything with mayonnaise sounds pretty good, right? So this got to be not too bad. Also, in Alabama, they kind of look at their barbecue apart from sauces. They're very much into their meats. So they almost view that as sometimes you use your sauces, sometimes you don't use the sauce. If the meat is very good, tender, the smoke is very good, they'll just go with that. Texas style. Well, Texas is an awfully big state. So Texas has probably about every one of those barbecue styles somewhere in Texas you could find. But Texas, of course, because of their big cattle operations, beef is a lot bigger. In most of the South, pork is the primary focus of barbecue. But when you get into Texas, there's more beef, brisket, and who knows what the Texas Trinity is. Apparently that's very popular in Texas. Anybody? Going to take any wild guesses? What's that?
Well, I think 2 are brisket and sausage. I'm not sure.
Very good. And one more, pork ribs.
Pork rib.
Brisket, sausage, and pork ribs is the Texas Trinity. Finally, not to be left out at all, and certainly not last in terms of taste, is Kansas City barbecue. Now, the history behind that, it's the only tradition in America that didn't really come out of the Old South. And what happened is, after the Civil War, a lot of now emancipated slaves, as well as typically poorer whites who didn't have anything after the war, were looking for opportunities. Many of them moved from the South to Kansas City, where there's a lot of booming operations and companies there. So they took their barbecue tradition to Kansas City, and Kansas City has now developed that into the point where a lot of people think that's the best barbecue in the country now. Kansas City barbecue has a lot of multiple spices. They use more than almost any other barbecue tradition. And they also have a very special base that they use. Can anyone guess what they use for their base here? Molasses. It's a molasses base, along with, of course, many of them use tomato sauce, but also quite a few spices. Onion powder, cayenne, and celery seed are also often used with there. They have played around with it and come up with apparently an absolutely delicious type sauce. So that just gives you a little bit of idea of what America has in terms of the different traditions here.